I think we can learn a lot from artists, especially musical artists, musicians who are in the mainstream and not the mainstream, and they have to build a brand online. I say have to build a brand online because their record labels, their managers, the outfits behind them, the team behind them who are doing so much to get their music heard and get them booked into venues, booked for a whole variety of deals, require them to have an online presence. But as an artist, as a creative, we know the torturous journey of trying to figure out how to do this whole promotional thing when it feels quite antithetical to our creative process. The creative process is something sometimes that is quite spontaneous. It's not methodical. It's not always thought out and super strategic because that can sort of take the magic away from the art form, but needs must, right? If you are an artist, a creative, or even a creator who is trying to cultivate and then maintain an online presence, it's not just another aspect to your day to day. It's not another string on your guitar. It's like having a different head, a different brain, a completely different mindset. And I think we run into trouble as creatives, artists, and creators of content. If you're storytelling, if you're bringing your discipline and your specialism to life, we run into a problem where we are having to go directly from thought to phone, device, and then putting it out there. And that becomes our sort of daily churn, if you like. That's a problem. So, how do you get this balance? Unfortunately, I don't think that balance is possible because it's an entirely different mindset. And turning it on and off as an artist, as a creative, as somebody who's building something in public isn't always so easy. It's not always possible. And it's the reason so many artists we have known over the time, musicians here, over the decades have chosen to go independent, away from the record label and all the industry bosses, so that they can call their own shots, that they can produce, promote at their own pace, so that they can choose where to perform, so they can choose the art that they want to make. They don't want it all dictated to them. And with that comes a real freedom, quite a high level of freedom. And when you have that freedom to create, perhaps it's then a little bit easier, or it's a little bit more enticing to share your process as it is, until you realize, the algorithm is like another record label. We now have to please the algorithm gods on every platform in the same way that we had to before please the record label bosses. It's probably got a high degree of freedom to it, but mostly still, if you are having to build a presence online as an artist, musician, creative creator, then absolutely you're going to have to play the algorithm game. And so, in this slightly longer episode, I want to discuss what it would be like for an artist to get some of their freedom back. And so I'm going to refer to all of the above as an artist. That's an artist, musician, creative, creator, content creator. Let's refer to all of you as an artist. For you to be able to get that freedom whilst having to appease the algorithm gods, for you to have to balance this whole technology thing, for you to have to deal with the constant demand for churn, the churn of content, for you to have to contend with what's going on for your audience in every aspect, because you need to connect with them and you want to connect with them and you want to resonate with what they care about. You're going to need some kind of a system. And the system that you need is going to be one that feels much more natural and fitting to your creative process, because your creative process is everything. And without it, there's no you. There's no you, and there's no, unfortunately, product or commodity to put out there to share. And so I'm going to share my system that I recommend to artists, to anyone building a brand in public. I'm going to recommend you tailoring my system to help you to make this journey of creating an online presence and a portal for your art, to make it doable, sustainable, pleasurable, and hopefully not robbing you of the magic that you need day to day to create art. Because the pressure that we now have from multiple platforms, and I feel it too, and I've had to do the same process for myself that I recommend over here. Hence, there's also a change in format, because I don't want the demand of content, connection, to sacrifice the thing that keeps me ticking every day. And as soon as you don't have that creative juice, that creative fulfillment, that ingredient that sustains you through all the professional and personal challenges, as soon as you don't have that, all of this feels quite automated. And it feels very much like a content creator who's on autopilot and is having to almost farm their own content, like engagement farms, right? So you're now forcing yourself to get in front of a camera, which I now will absolutely devoutly not do. I will not force myself to get in front of a camera unless I'm going to share insight in a way that feels very much in line and in alignment with me as an artist and as a creative. Even though I've had 20 plus years in media and communications, and if you've sort of been familiar with my story, I sort of fell into public relations in an accidental way. I wasn't quite sure whether to go the literature writing route, and I lost confidence, unfortunately. And so I thought, I need to do something that is proper. And this is 20 something years ago now. And so I decided on journalism, media, and there's a real synergy with journalism and public relations. And so I ended up in comms, in public relations. They're one and the same, really. And as a result of that, I've spent 20 something years mostly freelancing and then also having a 9 to 5, freelancing as a consultant, multi industry, creative and corporate. I learned so much about connecting with your audience and audiences and understanding stakeholders, relationships, understanding reputation management and crisis management. And as a chartered public relations practitioner and now studying systems thinking, I said systems thinking as an MSc, and I'm on the last leg of my master's actually. Hooray! And my research, which my research that I've just submitted a synopsis for, hopefully my advisor will approve, is all around, get this, AI, technology, and how it is, if I say this in a colloquial way, messing with our identity and ideation, messing with us as creatives and artists, and how we see ourselves and how we produce, but also as users and listeners and viewers, how it's impacting our sort of creative taste buds. And it's a really interesting area to explore because as artists, as creators, we are probably having to combat this day to day without realizing it, which is why I feel like this video and this pivot that I'm doing is so important, because this need for churn is really impacting the choices that we're making as artists and who we are and our legacy. And so, with my experience as an artist and creative myself, predominantly producing my art offline and not yet sharing it, as a creator, content creator, as somebody who's applying systems thinking models to my new research area and sharing that here, I want to re-engage you. If you've already subscribed, that's excellent. And if you're new, go ahead, please do consider it. But I want to re-engage you in why I put together this system, these 7 strategic zones, and how you can apply them to your art, to your art form, and how you want to build an audience online. And the very key thing with this model is for you to revisit it regularly and to reflect routinely, because this practice of reflecting on what you're doing and how you're looking to engage and connect will not only allow your campaigns relating to any new art that you're putting out there and that you're wanting to promote, it will make your campaigns much more strategic. It will make them intentional and hopefully not so labor intensive. Hopefully, it will make your content creation output a lot less painful and meaningful, meaningful to you as the artist. So let's start. The reason why the very first zone is strategic self awareness is because without awareness of who we are as the creator, the person with the message, without this sort of awareness and self knowledge, then why are we here? Why are we speaking? What are we offering? What is it for? You could even answer all of your 5 W's and how. So it's who, why, what, when, where, and how. But even deeper than that, and it really is something that has much more depth. This sort of strategic self-awareness has much more depth than those sort of simple survey questions. And the depth is at the very core of what you're about and what you're doing it for. should be your values and your intentions, and that's going to feed not only your art form and what you produce and what you look to produce day on day, but it should be part of the storytelling of your campaign and your engagement with anyone, with any stakeholder, whether it's press, whether it's an influencer, your audience, an owner for a venue. So you've got to keep that at the heart of your strategic planning. And it makes the strategic planning much more meaningful, having this sort of self awareness of you as an artist. And I was at the Tate Modern just the other day, and there was a sign that I took a photograph of and I posted it into one of my carousels on my Instagram. And it says, everything is delicately interconnected. And in systems thinking, that's how we see the world. It's about identifying, recognizing that everything is interrelated and interconnected, and to look at the feedback loops, the causal loops within every system, within every relationship, looking at all the interdependencies. And everything is so delicately interconnected. And with this, zone one, which is your strategic self awareness, I've just talked about your sort of core values, and it very much feeds in to zone six, which is your North Star and your value compass. Because if you don't know what your core values are, which is your North Star, and where you're headed and why you're headed there, then there goes your self awareness. There goes your intentional strategic campaign planning. So these things all interconnect, they all interrelate. So we've just covered zone one, your strategic self awareness, knowing what you're about and what you're doing it for. And maybe there's an intention or an objective there for the next 3 months, or for the rollout of your art, or that for that project, or for maybe for a season. Because remember, you can revisit this and review it frequently. And part of that self awareness is your zone six, your North Star, your value compass. That's the direction that it's sending you in. So it's really important you ask yourself these questions. And by the way, I have playlists that are set up for each of these zones. So if you want additional support, just go through those playlists. There's lots of videos and tutorials with prompts in them that will ask you to answer these questions, and it will help you get much more clear. Zone two, I've just mentioned interdependencies and your stakeholder mapping. As an artist, one of your stakeholders is the algorithm on the platform that you choose to share your art on. And understanding how that stakeholder, that algorithm works, and how you're going to engage with it, give it what it wants, teach it what you want. You've got to have that relationship with the algorithm. It's one of your stakeholders. And so that AI, that ever changing stakeholder, is a really good example of how you've got to keep your relationships with your stakeholders fresh, revisit them. You've got to reflect on them. This is a key thing in public relations and communications, and honestly, it's a key thing in business. And even as an artist, your relationships with who you collaborate with and the people who you create with are so important. And you want to invest in them, and they invest in you. And hopefully there's that reciprocal relationship. And you want to make sure that you're aware of any changes. And there are always changes, because everyone changes, including the algorithm. Let's get to zone three, which is about risk readiness and reputation design. In public relations, in my 20 plus years of experience, managing reputational risk is a really massive part of my work. And designing your reputation is something that is done with intention, with forecasting, with anticipation, with planning. You cannot escape this. By not doing this, you are at risk of reputational crisis. The first thing you've got to do with your risk readiness and reputational design with zone 3 is, what are the risks to you as an artist and your audiences and your place in the industry that you're in? What are the risks? Is this something controversial about the work that you're doing, about the lyrics in your music, about who you work with, about your personal beliefs? Listing these risks will then allow you to plan for the uncertainty of reputational risk, because it happens even if you weren't online. You are still in your industry and you are out there with the movers and the shakers in your world, whether it's a small pond or a large ocean. You are known, you are making yourself known, and it's important for you to map this. Each piece of work that you put out there will carry its own unique risks depending on the nature of the work. There was a recent post by rapper musician Vic Mensa, and on his Instagram, he decided to sit on a Muslim prayer mat whilst rapping, and it was an artist choice. And the prayer mat was facing the other direction, and some of his lyrics have curse words. And even though he was mimicking the act of prayer, and from a storytelling perspective, as he's sort of sharing his lyrics and his storytelling, he's doing so using imagery of a very sincere act. So he's making that impact. But unfortunately, because he did that and he made those artistic choices, the comment section was varied in its praise and its criticism. So that's an example of how an unlikely result can come about. So it can sometimes take the magic out of the art, but since we've already addressed the fact that you're going to be creating some kind of an online presence so that you can engage with your audience and create a following or a supportive community, then as soon as you put something out there, there's going to be a risk. And so it's really important to do this work, have a think, write it down with you or anyone that you work with, and have a little bit of a forecast or anticipation map of what could go wrong. Oh, I'm using imagery of a faith that is quite sort of protected by many, and they don't like anyone from outside of their group discussing, sorry, not discussing, but using imagery that relates to their faith for good reason. And the arguments for it could be completely rational and reasonable. And within every culture, within every faith, within every system of beliefs, there are going to be some risks and there are going to be some flashpoints of disaster. And so you've just got to be aware of them. I don't think anything has come of it that's been so controversial, so major, and so sort of reputationally damaging to Vic Mensa. But most of the comments, unfortunately, on that post were very critical. And I can only imagine then for the full music video on whatever platform, probably YouTube and any other, that some of the comments followed and reflected there in the same way. So it's something to think about. So that was just to, again, make the point that each project and each piece of work that you put out there carries its own risks, and it's completely dependent on the kind of work that you're putting out. Zone 4 is media literacy and zeitgeist awareness. Now, this is a really useful one, and even if you don't consider yourself to be very political, of course, you know what matters to your audience. So, whether it's to do with anything geopolitically or something more local to the community about any kind of a discrimination case, it might be something that's quite topical, that's in the news at the moment, or not. There might be some long standing issue or movement that your audience very much relate to, resonate with, and engage with. And there are some points where it becomes much more newsworthy. And so, are you prepared to either speak to that issue, speak on it, to show your audience and your community that are with them? It's quite tricky to even articulate just on the spot, which is why some planning needs to be done. And usually what we do in public relations is we do a in sort of especially in politics communications, we call them lines to take. And it's about having some lines prepared, some key messages prepared for each issue, just so that you're not caught on the back foot. So if you're ever asked on the spot by anyone, it could be in an interview, or it could be on the street if you were on a red carpet, or if you were in a podcast conversation with some other creatives, just so you're prepared. Because the last thing you want, especially, and this is used to happen to me a lot when I first launched my life vocabulary channel, and it was in 2016, and mainly in 2017, I interviewed a lot of creators, musicians, and artists. And on occasion, I would be asked by that one interviewee that I was having a conversation with on my podcast, could you delete that bit out? I'm not comfortable with it. And actually, one or two occasions, the person who I had interviewed had a brilliant conversation with. They said afterwards, I'm not comfortable. Could we just not put it out? I'll give you another interview. Or they said the first half is fine, the second half isn't. But you're closing, the flow of the conversation, all of that gets impacted. And so as the person creating the content, I would say please be prepared for interviews, but also for you, the artist, if the creator that you are giving that sort of time to, who has the receipts on you, they may not be so fair and so gracious and not publish the thing. So, what you need to do for sure is prepare. So, whatever the key issues are, maybe it's something to do with an ex, some online issue, maybe some TikTok investigator did something about you. Just be prepared. You are aware of what the sort of questions are about you, and so have some answers prepared. And this is very much about you being aware of, oh, having your finger on the pulse. You know what's going on. And so you're not going to get caught on the back foot. And, it might be that you're asked questions about what's going on in the culture. And rather than sounding like you have no idea because you're so tuned out and you're doing your own thing, you're just going to spend an hour a month just getting a little briefing on it with your collaborator, with your friend, with whoever's in your team, to say, what's going on at the moment? How could we tackle this? What are the key things that we could possibly say to sort of keep on top of this so that we just don't ever get caught on the back foot? Zone 5 is your engagement system and your content architecture. This is you deciding how are you going to be engaging with your people? What is your content architecture? Keep it super simple. I'm in the process of keeping mine super simple. I'm in the process of only having one Instagram account. I'm in the process of being very niche and clear with each of my YouTube channels, and being very intentional with my I would say Substack. So that's my content architecture. It's mainly one Instagram, it's a TikTok account, it's three YouTube channels, maybe more, and a Substack account. And that's because I have been doing this for a while, and I have found that I have struggled to do sort of become a successful content creator because the artist and creative in me just doesn't ever allow me to do it in a sustainable way. And so now that I have a system and I'm actually studying systems thinking and I follow my own model, I'm able to do multiple channels and they all have their own intention. And thankfully it works now. I just wish I'd started studying years ago so that I could have understood not only how this game works, but how to do it in a sustainable way and not impact my art and my creativity. So be very intentional with the kind of engagement system and content system that you have. That is your architecture. That's how you're going to build your community and engage with them. So be careful. Just don't do what I've done in the past, which is spread yourself thin across multiple platforms because you thought that you could follow the advice of somebody who was purely all about content creation and they weren't an artist. Less said about that. The better. Zone 6, your North Star and value compass, I already spoke about, but again, just to come back to this, when you go through the first 5 zones that I've just gone through, it's helpful for you to return to your zone 6, which is so my North Star, what is it and what's my value compass? And does all of this fit within that? It's really important to have that conversation. What kind of an artist are you? Are you centered around a certain medium? Is there a certain message? Is there a certain style? What is it that makes you unique? Or what is it that's currently what you are absolutely obsessed about and what you are absolutely 100% about as an artist, as a creator? So see if you can identify these things. And, we always change, we're constantly evolving. So um, coming back to this every quarter can really help us to allow ourselves to evolve. Asking ourselves these questions can sometimes give us that nudge to change, to switch things up, to progress as the artist, as a creative. I'm sure by now you've heard of The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron, and I'm actually going through the book again 20 years later, and it's excellent because it's a workbook. It asks you questions and you're doing that thing which is reflecting. You're reflecting on yourself as an artist, and it gives you that time and space to have a much deeper consideration of what you're doing and what you're doing it for. And in systems thinking, moving on quite nicely to zone 7, we call that reflexivity. It's called reflexive thinking, and what it's about is you are going to question yourself, your assumptions, your biases. And the reason why you're going to do that is because you don't want to be unaware about something you need to be aware of. You don't want to get in your own way. You don't want to have any blind spots. And if you have them, just got to know what they are, just so you're aware. Because these things can block us creatively. It can block us from having a flourishing community online, and we don't want that to sort of get in our way. So I would highly recommend that you spend a little time on your reflexivity, your reflection. And doing a workbook like The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron is great. I would recommend my system to do once a month, just going through all six all 7 zones. And the last thing with zone 7, it's not just reflexive thinking, but it's the bricklayer mindset. And when I heard about the bricklayer mindset and what bricolage is, when I first started studying systems thinking, it just rocked my world, because the bricklayer is somebody who will use everything in their arsenal, everything in their skill set to create, to do the thing. And it really reminded me of me as an artist, me as a creative. I'm not just sort of putting myself in this little box. I'm actually capable of doing so many more things. And as a result of that, I definitely see that I've not been that jack of all trades person. I've been that person who's a master of many, or at least building up to be a master of many. And so identifying where you are in your sort of bricklayer mindset, in your sort of bricolage, is really, really key. So is it that you can also produce your beats as well as record and sing and songwrite? Or is it that you happen to do pottery as well as journalism? I mean, there's so many things that are at your disposal, and perhaps even in your repertoire, that you could be using, that could form part of your strategic planning to create that presence that you want in order to connect with your community. So again, we could Use my system, all 7 my zones, to look at any facet of your artist and creative journey, which is what you're here for, hopefully, and which is what I will be producing more videos about. So I really do appreciate you taking the time and attention for this new format video. And we know that our time and attention is so crucial. It's so important. So the fact that you've given me your time and attention is excellent. So I'm so grateful for it. I wish you the very best on your journey. There are more ways that you can connect with me. They're all in the description. And if you want my complimentary reputation management, think like a PR masterclass, then you can access that as well. Come join me on my site. There are many other ways that you can connect with me. You can find them all, and I'll see you in the next video.